By Leader Moment, our host, Joseph Baker, will be joining us, along with a very special guest. Before we get started, I would like to introduce you to Joseph. He's a podcaster, event producer, writer, speaker, and audience builder. His passion is to help authors, speakers, and entrepreneurs build their audiences to monetize their leadership. Won't you please welcome our host, Joseph Baker.
Well, thanks so much for that intro. I'm here today on the Compendium Podcast with Paul Furiga. Paul is the president and chief storyteller of WordWrite. Since its founding in 2002, WordWrite has grown into one of the Pittsburgh region's largest independent public relations agencies. In 2019, the Pittsburgh Business Times named WordWrite one of the region's 50 fastest growing companies. WordWrite works with the providers of complex services, connecting them to the decision makers who hire them. WordWrite does this by uncovering, developing, and then sharing an organization's capital S story, the one that stands above all other stories an organization may share because it answers these questions. Why should someone buy from you, work from you, invest in you, or partner with you? Paul, very excited to have you today on the Compendium Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, and honored to be here with your audience as well.
Awesome. So, Paul, you have this book, The Capital S Story. And I think the first question that I had, the first question that our audience may have is, what is this capital S? Tell us a little bit about how you came up with this title and what it means for us.
Sure, absolutely. Well, the concept behind the capital S is it's a little bit of a fun and game sort of thing, I suppose. As business leaders, as organizational leaders, we share a lot of stories all day long. And the concept behind a capital S story is that of all the stories that a leader shares, there's one that stands above the rest, so it gets a capital S. And that is, as you said in the introduction, the one that answers these four fundamental questions about any organization, really. Why somebody would buy from you. Now, if you're a nonprofit, that's, why would somebody be a donor? Why would somebody be a volunteer, right? Work for you. Obviously, we're in this period of time when we're recording this episode known as the Great Resignation. A lot of people wondering about purpose and meaning and what kind of organizations they want to work for. So being crystal clear on that is very, very important in your capital S story. And then sometimes, if you're growing a company and you want investors, you've got to share the right story. And of course, many organizations are interested in partnering today. That's how small organizations can have a big impact in a connected world, right? So it's the story that defines the character and nature of the organization.
Excellent. And how did you discover the problem or the challenge in the marketplace? As you were preparing to write this, what have you seen over the years that really inspired you to write on this topic?
Well, I'm old, so I've seen a lot of things. I spent 2 decades in journalism, and I figured it out one time. Over those 2 decades, I wrote 10,000 stories and edited another 10,000. So look at it this way, Joe, you're with people in the best moments of their lives and the worst moments of their lives. I saw a lot of beginnings, middles, and ends. It was really a tremendous introduction to the power of story and what kinds of stories compel the interest of an audience, right? And I've spent about another 2 decades in the agency business. When I made the transition from journalism to the agency business, everybody seemed fixated on the concept of story, but nobody could seem to describe it. I thought to myself, well, I know what a story is. And by the way, I know you have a background in marketing. It's not usually what people in marketing think it is. And more importantly, it's also not what people at the top of the organization may think it is. And what I mean by that is business leaders, organizational leaders are often fixated on results, but their ability to connect those results to what the story of the organization may be is not always as great as it could be, because they're forgetting that storytelling, which, by the way, it's the original communications medium. No batteries required. All you need is an imagination and a brain, right? We get caught up in, oh, what social media platform should I be on? Or what tool should I use? Or how long should my commercial be, or do I need billboards? And all of those things are important considerations, but they have to happen after you've understood what your story is, who needs to see it, hear it, and experience it, and critically important, what's the best way to reach those people.
That's awesome. As you were speaking, I was reminded of a recent, modest size speaking engagement that I was in. And I immediately, right after I was introduced, I launched into a story about one time when I was a young man and I actually rescued my sister from kidnapping. And it was actually a
Wow.
really fun story to tell. And it's amazing, like you're saying, with storytelling, you immediately engage your
Yes, you do.
audience's brain. And I could just see, went right into the story, and everyone in the room was engaged right away.
Yes.
And so I very much resonate with that, with the power of storytelling.
Oh, I appreciate that. That's a great example too. And it must be an amazing story if you were able to rescue your sister that way. Holy cow.
Yes. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about the difference between telling the story of your organization and then sort of telling the story of your customer if you're working with a customer. Because I know there are a lot of marketers that talk about that. They say, well, you should be telling and engaging with the story of what your customer is going through.
Right.
But
Right.
you seem to be talking a little bit more about telling the story of your organization as a business. How do those two things relate in your world?
So many organizations, most I would say, are looking for fans, followers, participants, right? So definitely there should be a desire to make your audience, whoever they may be, part of the story. There are some stories that are customer centric. However, I do think far too many people in marketing are fixated on only one kind of story, and it's not always the right story. And that story is make the customer the hero in the story, right? So I write in the book about Nike. Nike heroes are not the weekend warriors who wear Nike shoes, right? They're the Michael Jordans and the Tiger Woods type folks of the world who also use and are the endorsers of or the faces of these products, right? I also write about Southwest Airlines in the book. People don't fly Southwest to be a hero. They fly Southwest because Southwest is the outlaw. And what I mean by that is whatever all the other airlines do to nickel and dime their flying public, Southwest doesn't do that. That's what makes them the Robin Hood of the airline industry. So there's two examples there for you of companies, organizations where, yes, there's heroes in the story and you want your customers to be part of the story, but it's not that the spotlight shines on the customer and you're going to be Michael Jordan if you wear Nike. It's, I'm going to do weekend runs and I can wear the same kind of running shoes that my hero does. And that makes me part of something larger than myself.
Excellent. Talk to us a little bit about the secrets in the book, the aha moments. Tell us something that really struck you even as you were formulating the book.
Well, I always knew in my gut, Joe, that the idea of storytelling was not some foo-foo made up thing, because we've been telling stories as human beings, coming up with them, developing them, sharing them since, the first two people got together. Probably the way one person taught a second person to make a fire was some form of a story, right? So I have this chapter in the book, storytelling is biology, it's not BS. A lot of people think that storytelling is, like I said, BS, foo-foo. But what we've learned in the last 20 years or so with the availability of functional magnetic resonance imaging machinery and other brain scanning technology, a great storyteller, like your story, Joe, when you were speaking, what happens with a really great story is the brain activity of the storyteller syncs up with those listening to the story. And I think, the audience, how many times have you been to a performance, music, watched a movie, and you said to yourself, you were so caught up in it, I just didn't want it to end. That is, to me, the individual personal evidence that this is happening. But we now have the scientific evidence to show and I have a Princeton University study in the book where this was done. A young woman shared an embarrassing prom story. And then they took 30 random individuals and they put them in an fMRI and they exposed them to the story. And when they were done, what they learned was the same brainwave patterns in this young woman telling the story showed up in the brainwave patterns of the people who listened to it. It's like, holy cow. That kind of science, by the way, has been repeated many, many times over the last 20 years. So that's a big aha. This is science, folks. It's the way the human brain works.
That's awesome. What's something that you could tell us that is not in the book, something that didn't quite make it in, but that we might find fascinating now that you're able to share with us?
Here's a funny thing that happens a lot. There are many kinds of storytelling experts, and I think most of us are exposed to what I'll call the performative storyteller. And so a lot of times people will expect that if you write a book about storytelling, I had one person come up to me one time and they said, "Oh, you're a storyteller. So do you dress up in a Native American costume and sit at a campfire?" I said, no. That's not the way this thing works. But my point is that even if you write a book on storytelling, you can make big storytelling mistakes. Years ago, I had the opportunity to work on a political campaign, and it was my job to work with what today we would call influencers. I'm old, so this is before the internet. And I actually sent a rejection letter to the famous American author, Norman Mailer. He wanted to help write something for this campaign I was on. And it was in the early days of word processing, and I had some interns working for me, and I should have checked, but I didn't. And, the same letter that went out to people who had no business writing anything for anybody went out to Norman Mailer. So I had to call him up on the phone and apologize. That was quite humbling. And, storytellers are human too. They make mistakes, even the best.
Can you give us a real world example of perhaps a client you've worked with, a company that you've worked with that has utilized this power of storytelling?
Oh, absolutely.
Just tell us a little success story if you can.
Yeah. And I think this is something really important for the audience to remember. You don't have to be Nike and you don't have to be Southwest for this to work. Why do I talk about those companies? Because everybody can relate to those organizations. They're so well known. Our work is with, as you said in the introduction, providers of complex services. So think accounting firms, law firms. So we worked with an accounting firm a few years ago, and they were really not sure what their story was. They weren't sure who their customers should be. The market they were in was experiencing a lot of trouble. Through our trademark process, which is described in the book, it's called story crafting. We helped them, number one, understand that they were the experts in their industry and they belonged there. And not only that they were such experts that there was an archetypal story that described them, and that is the sage. There was a conference that in their industry that whoever runs the government program for that part of their accounting industry couldn't make it. And the government called them up and said, "The guy's sick. Will you speak?" Well, my goodness. I mean, in any industry, when the ultimate authority says, "You're as good of an expert as we are, you are a sage." Now, these are accountants. Joe, we did not take their website and their messaging. These poor folks aren't wandering the face of the earth with their glasses and their calculators and saying, "Hi, I'm a sage, hire me." What we did is we reworked their brand, all of their content, all of their messaging, up to and including their tagline, which their tagline became a higher grade of accounting, right? So, and we wanted people to ask them, "What do you mean by higher grade of accounting?" Because then that would give these accountants the opportunity to talk about what experts they were, right? So that's a real world example. I guarantee you this is a fine firm, multi-million-dollar business. Nobody's heard of the firm, I'm sure, except the people who need to hire them, which is good, of course.
Remind me real quick, Paul, what is the website for your firm?
Absolutely. The website is WordWrite, words like what we speak, write with what we do with a pen, pr.com, wordwritepr.com. And if you go to wordwritepr.com/story crafting, which is our process, you'll get a sample chapter of my book. You'll get the link to buy the book. You'll learn all about our process.
That's awesome. If you had one thought that you could leave our listeners and our viewers with today in regards to storytelling and how it can really help their business, how would you summarize that in one final thought today?
I truly believe that we are born God-given creative individuals, And over the course of time, through whatever process, a lot of this creativity is beaten out of us by life, right? And storytelling is all about reconnecting with that creativity. Human beings, Joe, we're passionate individuals. Reconnect with the passion that exists within you. You'll reconnect with your story. Focus on that story, and you'll have the best success you could possibly imagine.
Excellent. Paul, thank you so much for being with us today. You can find Paul Furiga at wordwritepr.com. Please go over there, check it out, and grab a copy of his book, which is capital S Story. You can also find his book at leadershipbooks.com, and be sure to follow up with him there. Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening to the Compendium Podcast, and we will catch you in the next episode.
Thank you for joining us for today's broadcast. I do hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And be sure to visit us online at leadershipbooks.store. There you'll find the works of some of the finest thought leaders today. And be sure to tune in here each week to gain even deeper insights from one of those leaders on the Compendium Podcast.